My wife slept with multiple men after she got a promotion. I collected proof, got her fired, took the house and left her with nothing. Hey everyone, I really never thought I'd be posting here, but here I am. I need some advice because my life's been flipped upside down, and I'm not sure where to go from here. To give you some background, my wife, Karen, and I have been married for about 10 years. We met in college, hit it off immediately, and it felt like we were meant for each other. We built a life together. Nice house, decent jobs, and no kids yet, though we've been planning to start a family soon. Things were good, or at least I thought they were. Karen works in marketing, and recently got a promotion to some kind of regional director role. She was super excited about it, and I was proud of her, even if it meant more late nights and business trips. At first, I didn't mind. Everyone's got a hustle, right? But soon enough, things started feeling off. She'd come home late, texting way more than usual, and making a point to go out with her colleagues more often. I figured she was just celebrating her success, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to brush it off, but the late nights and secretive phone calls were starting to stack up. It was like she was slipping away, and I didn't know why. That's when things took a turn. At first, I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my gut. Karen was always ambitious. Her promotion to regional director was a huge deal, and she worked hard for it. But as the weeks went by, things started getting weird. She was always glued to her phone, giggling at messages she wouldn't show me. She used to tell me everything, who she was texting, what happened at work, but now, when I'd ask, she'd just say it was work stuff and change the subject. Then there were the late-night meetings and last-minute trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. She'd leave the house in business suits, but when she came back, she'd be wearing outfits I'd never seen before, looking like she'd just come from a night out. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, though. This was my wife, the woman I've spent a decade building a life with. But then came the excuses. It's just the nature of the job, she'd say when I'd ask why she didn't answer her phone while she was away. You know how it is, babe. Networking events, keeping clients happy. But something about her voice didn't sit right with me. It wasn't the Karen I knew, the Karen I trusted. And that's when I realized I couldn't just ignore the signs anymore. Something was definitely going on, and I had to find out what. It all came crashing down one night when Karen had left for yet another work dinner. I was alone at home, trying to distract myself with TV, but my mind kept wandering back to her. She'd been distant, secretive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. That's when my phone buzzed, a notification from one of our shared cloud accounts. Karen had been careless enough to leave her phone's auto backup on, and every few hours, her photos would sync to the cloud. I opened the app, not expecting much, but then my heart stopped. There they were, pictures of her at a fancy bar with some guy I didn't recognize. Definitely not anyone from her office, at least not anyone she'd mentioned. They were sitting way too close, laughing, with his hand casually resting on her leg. I scrolled further, and my stomach churned. Selfies of them together, his arm around her waist, and in the last one, he was kissing her neck. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just some innocent work dinner. This was proof, undeniable, gut-wrenching proof, that my wife was sleeping with someone else. My first instinct was to call her, demand answers, but I stopped myself. If this was just one guy, how many more were there? How long had this been going on? I needed more than just anger. I needed to be smart about this. I didn't confront her that night. As much as I wanted to explode, to scream at her, I knew I had to keep calm if I was going to get the full story. I spent the next couple of days pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was on fire. Karen, oblivious to the fact that I had found those pictures, went about her usual routine. More late nights, more unexplained absences, more fake smiles. Every time she kissed me goodbye before heading out, I felt like I was going to be sick. I decided to dig deeper. Her phone had become a treasure trove of information, so I started checking it when she was asleep. And what I found was worse than I could have imagined. Texts with not one, but two other men, all with the same flirty banter, plans to meet up, and those same lines about work trips. Finally, after days of gathering evidence, I decided to confront her. One evening when she came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the photos and texts on the screen. I could hear her keys in the door, her usual cheerful, "Hey, babe," as she walked in. "Sit down, Karen," I said quietly. She paused, clearly sensing something was off. When she saw the laptop, her face went pale. "What's this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think you know exactly what this is," I said, pushing the laptop toward her. "Care to explain?" Her reaction was exactly what I expected. First, denial. Then, the lies. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "Those are just friends. We're just messing around. It's harmless." "Don't lie to me, Karen," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've got texts, I've got pictures. You've been sleeping with these guys, and you know it." She tried to spin more excuses, but I wasn't having it. For the first time in our marriage, I saw the real her, someone who could look me in the eyes and lie without blinking. That's when I knew this wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal, and there was no coming back from it. After I confronted her, the silence was suffocating. It felt like the walls were closing in, and the weight of everything she'd done was pressing down on me. Karen just sat there, stunned, unable to speak at first. She knew she was caught, and there was no way out this time. "What do you want me to say?" she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "I messed up, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen." She was looking at me with these desperate eyes, like she thought saying sorry would magically make everything right, like an apology could erase months of betrayal. But I was past apologies. I could feel a mix of emotions swirling inside me: rage, heartbreak, confusion. "How long has this been going on, Karen?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She hesitated before answering. "A few months." Months. My mind struggled to process it. All this time, she had been living this double life, sneaking around, lying to me, and for what? I clenched my fists under the table, trying to stay calm, but inside I was breaking. "How many?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper, dreading the answer. She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. "3," she muttered, barely able to look at me. "3. 3 men." It was like being punched in the gut all over again. My legs felt weak, and I had to turn away from her. I walked over to the window, staring blankly outside, trying to catch my breath. "I don't even recognize you anymore," I said quietly. The woman I had built a life with, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, was a complete stranger now. Behind me, Karen started sobbing, apologizing over and over, but her words felt empty. Nothing she could say would change what she had done. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her. It was too much. The pain was unbearable. Everything I thought we had, it was all a lie. After that night, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to cry anymore, and I sure as hell didn't want to feel sorry for myself. Karen had destroyed our marriage, but I wasn't going to sit around and let her keep the upper hand. If she wanted to live a double life, fine. I'd make sure she paid for it. For the next few days, I acted normal. Well, as normal as I could. I still went to work, still smiled when she came home, but inside I was already planning my next move. The nights were the hardest. Every time I looked at her, I felt this rage boiling up inside me, but I knew I had to stay calm. My goal was simple. I wanted proof. Solid proof that would blow her lies apart. If I was going to walk away from this marriage, I was going to do it on my terms. She wasn't going to get to play the victim. I started collecting everything: the texts, the photos, even her financial records. It didn't take long to find out that some of those business trips weren't covered by her company. They were her paying for hotel rooms out of pocket. She was sloppy, leaving digital footprints everywhere. I kept digging, and the more I found, the more it disgusted me. But that disgust fueled me. Every little piece of evidence felt like a win. I was building my case, and once it was airtight, I'd confront her again, this time with no way out. I wanted her to know that she didn't just cheat on me. She underestimated me. But I wasn't done. Getting proof was just the first step. I had bigger plans for her. Once I started gathering evidence, it became almost an obsession. I didn't just want enough proof to confront Karen. I wanted to blow her world apart. I started monitoring everything. Her phone, her emails, even her social media. Every time she left the house, I'd check her computer, her browsing history, and even her location history. She had no idea how much of her life I was uncovering right under her nose. I knew about her 3 affairs, but as I kept digging, I realized there was more to it. One of the men she was seeing was actually her boss, the same guy who had promoted her. The other 2 were colleagues from work, but this thing with her boss was on another level. It wasn't just some fling. It was a full-blown relationship. The worst part, that promotion she had been so proud of wasn't because of her hard work. It was because she was sleeping with him. I found emails, flirty messages about their nights together, discussions about company trips, and him talking about how he'd taken care of her promotion. It was disgusting. That's when it hit me. I could do more than just destroy her personally. I could wreck her entire career, her promotion, her reputation. All of it was built on lies. I knew what I had to do next. Expose her at work. The thought of bringing her whole professional life crashing down gave me a sense of satisfaction that almost surprised me. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation, the same betrayal. I wasn't just going to walk away from this marriage. I was going to take everything from her, piece by piece. Now that I had everything I needed, it was time to set my plan in motion. I wanted Karen to fall hard, and I wanted it to be a slow, crushing blow. The first step was making sure her boss and her colleagues knew exactly who they were dealing with. I had all the emails, the texts, and even the hotel receipts that showed her affair with the boss. It was all there, laid out like a map of her deception. I started by drafting an anonymous email. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to get the wheels turning. I attached a few of the more damning emails between her and the boss. Nothing explicit, but enough to raise eyebrows. I sent it to her company's HR department, making sure to point out that the promotion she received was likely connected to their affair. Once the email was sent, I waited. It didn't take long for things to start unraveling. I knew from the office gossip I overheard from her that their HR department was strict, especially about workplace relationships. I could almost picture the look on her boss's face when the email hit his inbox. The fallout was going to be glorious. At home, I kept my cool. Karen was completely unaware of what was coming her way. She still went about her routine, occasionally throwing in a fake smile or a half-hearted attempt to ask how my day was. The irony was almost laughable. Here she was, thinking she was still in control, when in reality, everything was about to collapse around her. I wasn't done, though. While I waited for the company to react, I started making moves on the home front. I saw a lawyer and got all my financials in order. The house was in both of our names, but I had a plan to make sure that when the dust settled, it'd be mine. Every detail was meticulously laid out, and when the time was right, I'd hit her with it all at once. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to leave her with nothing. It didn't take long for the consequences to catch up with her. About a week after I sent the email, I noticed a shift in Karen's behavior. She was quieter, more on edge, and I could tell something was weighing heavily on her. Then, one evening, she came home from work looking completely rattled. "They called me into HR today," she said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the panic in her voice. "Oh," I responded, pretending to be uninterested while my heart raced with anticipation. "What for?" "They got an anonymous tip about me and my boss." She hesitated before continuing. "Someone sent them emails between me and him." I acted surprised. "What did they say?" Her face turned red as she struggled to explain. "They said it looks like I might have gotten the promotion because of our relationship. They're launching an investigation. She sat down, burying her face in her hands. I could tell she was terrified, not just of losing her job, but of the humiliation that was bound to follow. Her perfect professional reputation, the one she'd built up for years, was crumbling right before her eyes. And she had no idea I was behind it. "Don't worry," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm sure it'll blow over." But we both knew it wouldn't. HR was already digging into her history, and I'd made sure to provide them with more than enough to raise red flags. She wasn't just going to lose her promotion. Her entire career was on the line. As I watched her fall apart, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. She had destroyed our marriage, betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now she was facing the consequences. But this was just a beginning. I still had the house, the divorce papers, and the final blow planned. I was going to take everything she valued and leave her with nothing but regret. With her job hanging by a thread, I knew the time had come to make my next move. The pieces were falling into place, and it was time to serve her the divorce papers. I'd already met with my lawyer and set everything up. The house, our assets, all carefully arranged to ensure I came out on top. One evening, when Karen was still reeling from the HR investigation, I dropped the papers on the kitchen table while she was pouring herself a glass of wine. She glanced at them, not realizing at first what they were, but when she saw the word divorce, her face went pale. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my tone cold. "I'm done, Karen. This marriage is over." She stared at me in disbelief, her eyes wide. "You're leaving me? Now? After everything?" I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. "After everything? You mean after you slept with your boss, ruined our marriage, and lied to my face for months? Yeah, Karen, I think it's time." She started crying, pleading with me, saying she could fix things, that we could go to therapy, work it out, all the usual lines. But I wasn't listening. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime, and there was nothing she could say that would change my mind. "I've already filed," I said calmly. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Oh, and by the way, I'm keeping the house." Her eyes widened even more, and I could see the shock turning into panic. "The house? You can't just—" "I can and I will," I interrupted. "You see, I've been preparing for this for a while now. All the evidence I've collected, that's more than enough to ensure I get what I want in the divorce." Karen was speechless. She tried to argue, but I could tell she was running out of excuses. She had no leverage, no cards left to play. I had outmaneuvered her every step of the way, and now she was facing the reality of what her actions had cost her. As she sat there, crying into her hands, I felt nothing but a cold sense of finality. This was what she deserved. She thought she could have it all, her career, her affairs, and her marriage. But now she was losing everything. And I wasn't done yet. There was still one final step in my plan. With the divorce papers served and her career unraveling, I had one last card to play. It wasn't enough just to take the house and leave Karen with nothing. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. Personally, professionally, and socially. She had destroyed our marriage, and now it was time for her to feel the same level of destruction. I waited a few days after dropping the divorce bombshell. Karen had been in a daze, hardly speaking, locked away in my house. She spent her days making frantic calls, probably trying to salvage her job, and her nights silently crying herself to sleep. But it was too late for her to save anything. That's when I launched the final part of my plan. Using all the evidence I had gathered, the text emails, and the affair details, I created an anonymous package. I sent it to a few key people in our social circle. Close friends, family members, and even some of her work colleagues. Everything was laid out, all the details of her cheating and manipulation. I wanted people to see her for who she really was. I knew it would blow up her world. Karen had always prided herself on being the perfect wife, the one who had it all together. But now, everyone would know the truth, that behind the facade, she had been living a lie. Her reputation, both at work and among our friends, was about to crumble just like everything else. The fallout was immediate. I started getting calls and messages from mutual friends, some shocked, others angry, asking how I was holding up. I played the part of the devastated husband, but deep down, I was satisfied. Karen, on the other hand, was getting the cold shoulder from everyone. Her social circle began to shrink as people distanced themselves from the drama, and she quickly became the subject of whispers and judgment. I could see the toll it was taking on her. She tried to confront me a few times, asking if I had anything to do with the rumor spreading. I just shrugged, keeping my face neutral. It's amazing how quickly people talk, isn't it? I said casually. Her face crumbled, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She knew I had orchestrated it all, but there was nothing she could do to stop it. She was trapped, caught in the web of her own deceit. The damage was done. She was alone, jobless, and now even her friends were abandoning her. Watching her fall apart was the closure I needed. I had taken everything from her, just like she had taken everything from me. The fallout from my final move was more brutal than even I had anticipated. Karen was a shell of the confident woman she once was. The whispers had turned into full-blown rumors, and her reputation, at work and within our social circle, was beyond repair. She couldn't show her face without being met with sideways glances or hushed conversations. Then, the inevitable happened. She lost her job. The HR investigation concluded, and with the evidence of her affair with her boss, they had no choice but to let her go. It wasn't just about the inappropriate relationship. Her colleagues had completely lost respect for her. The promotion was tainted, and the trust she had built with her team was shattered. No one wanted to work with someone who had climbed the ladder by sleeping with the boss. I remember the day she came home after being fired. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes puffy from crying. She walked into the living room, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "They let me go." I didn't offer any comfort. I just sat there, watching her unravel in front of me. This was what she had sown, and now she was reaping the consequences. The house was silent, the air heavy with everything unsaid between us. "I don't know what to do anymore," she finally sobbed. "Everything is falling apart." I had nothing to offer her. In my mind, this was exactly where she deserved to be. She had built her life on lies, and now those lies had cost her everything: her career, her friends, her reputation. Even her family had begun to pull away. Her parents, always proud of her success, were now embarrassed, ashamed to be associated with the scandal. I didn't respond. What could I say? There was nothing left between us but bitterness and resentment. I had been planning my revenge for months, and now that it was complete, I felt strangely empty. Watching her break down, I realized that while I had destroyed her life, it didn't erase the pain she had caused me. Karen didn't even have the fight left in her anymore. The once defiant woman who had lied and cheated was now lost, broken beyond recognition. She stayed in the house out of necessity, but the air between us was cold, filled with an unspoken understanding that this was the end. All that remained was for her to leave for good. In the days following her firing, Karen barely left the house. She shuffled around, trying to hold on to some semblance of normalcy, but we both knew it was over. We didn't speak much, and when we did, it was brief, almost mechanical. There was no more shouting, no more blaming. The fight had drained out of both of us. One evening, as we sat in the same room but miles apart emotionally, she finally spoke. "I think I should move out," she said quietly, her voice hollow. I didn't respond at first, letting the silence fill the room. Then I nodded. It's probably for the best. Karen had nowhere to go. Her job was gone, her reputation ruined, and even her friends had abandoned her. But I wasn't about to feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. I had already won the house in the divorce, and she knew it. There was no reason for her to stay anymore. "I'll start packing tomorrow," she added, her voice trembling. She glanced at me, as if hoping for some kind of response, but I didn't give her one. There was nothing left to say. The next day, she began packing her things. It was surreal, watching her quietly box up the life we had built together. Every once in a while, she would stop and look around, like she was trying to make sense of how it had all fallen apart so quickly. I didn't help her. I couldn't. This was the path she had chosen, and now she was walking it alone. I remember seeing her pause at the framed photos on the wall. Pictures of vacations, anniversaries, moments that seemed perfect on the surface. She didn't take any of them. I think even she knew those memories didn't belong to her anymore. By the end of the week, the house was mostly empty of her presence. She had packed up what little she had left, and the day she moved out came without fanfare. No long goodbyes, no emotional confrontation. She just quietly loaded her car and stood by the door, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking, "for everything." I stood there for a moment, trying to feel something, anger, relief, anything, but all I felt was tired. "Goodbye, Karen," I said, and with that, she walked out of my life. As I watched her car disappear down the street, I didn't feel victorious. There was no sense of triumph, no satisfaction in watching her leave. The revenge had been sweet at first, but now it felt hollow. All I was left with was the echo of a broken marriage and the empty silence of a house that used to be filled with love. After Karen left, the house felt eerily quiet, like it had been drained of all life. It wasn't the victorious feeling I thought it would be. The truth is, I had been so focused on making her pay that I never really thought about what came next. Now, with her gone, the reality of what I'd done started to settle in. I had won. I had the house. The divorce was in my favor, and Karen's life had crumbled. She had nothing left, and I had everything, at least on the surface. But as I stood in the now empty living room, surrounded by echoes of our past, I couldn't shake the emptiness that filled the space. All the things we had shared, all the memories we had built together, were gone, and I wasn't sure if I had truly gained anything in return. The days following her departure were a strange mix of relief and regret. I didn't miss Karen, not really, but I missed the life we had before everything fell apart. I missed the simplicity, the sense of stability I had once felt. Now, all I had was a big house and a lot of time to think about what had been lost. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the void with anything that would keep me distracted. But at night, when I came home to an empty house, it was impossible to ignore the silence. I found myself wandering through the rooms, remembering the good times, before the lies, before the betrayal. People always talk about the sweet taste of revenge, but no one tells you about the bitter aftertaste. I had spent months plotting, planning, and executing my perfect revenge, and it had worked. But now that it was all over, the victory didn't feel as fulfilling as I had imagined. Friends reached out, offering their support, but I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to dive back into a social life, not when I was still trying to make sense of everything. I didn't need sympathy. I needed to figure out what came next. The anger I had carried for so long was gone, replaced by something else, something emptier. I had torn Karen's life apart, but in doing so, I had destroyed something in myself as well. Maybe it was my sense of trust, or maybe it was the part of me that believed in second chances. Either way, it was gone. For now, all I could do was sit in the aftermath and wait for the pieces to settle. Weeks passed, and life slowly started to take on a new rhythm. The house, once filled with reminders of Karen, felt less like a museum of our failed marriage and more like my own space. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and started making plans to remodel the kitchen. Anything to make the place feel less like our home and more like my fresh start. I didn't hear from Karen after she left, and that was fine by me. From what I gathered through mutual friends, she was staying with her parents, trying to figure out her next steps. It didn't surprise me that she was keeping a low profile. She had no job, no real friends left, and nowhere else to go. Part of me felt a small pang of pity for her, but I quickly pushed it aside. She had made her choices. As for me, I began to focus on myself. It had been years since I'd thought about my own happiness, my own future. My life had revolved around the marriage for so long, and when it crumbled, I realized I hadn't thought about what I truly wanted in a long time. So, I started exploring that. I took up hobbies I'd put aside during our marriage: photography, hiking, even traveling. I reconnected with old friends who welcomed me back with open arms and made new ones along the way. For the first time in years, I felt free. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy, but slowly, day by day, the weight of everything began to lift. The process wasn't without its bumps. Some nights were still hard. Nights when the silence was too loud, and I found myself staring at old photos, wondering how things had gone so wrong. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. I learned that healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, but it was moving forward. In the end, the revenge that once consumed me faded into the background. I didn't need to dwell on what I'd done to Karen anymore. It didn't define me. What mattered now was rebuilding my life on my terms. As I stood on the back porch one evening, looking out at the sunset, I realized something. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry or hurt. I was ready to let go, ready to move on with my life. I had survived the worst of it, and now it was time to embrace whatever came next. The future was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would take me.